The tomato is an important part of today's food system. It is used in just about every culture around the world, but this wasn't always the case. It is almost unimaginable to picture a world without tomatoes. The tomato is part of the nightshade family, which includes many species of fruit that are better known as vegetables. The tomato is closely related to the potato and the eggplant. The Solanese family also includes chili peppers, bell peppers, and tobacco. Tomato's relationship to eggplant is not surprising because of the similar ways both grow and their overall anatomy. The potato is a little bit more surprising because it grows in the ground, whereas both the tomato and the eggplant grow above ground. But the biggest surprise is that the tomato is in the same family as tobacco. The tomato plant consists of roots, stem, leaves, flowers, and fruit. The roots, like most plants, have either fibrous or taproot systems. Tomatoes can have either depending on if they are grown from seedlings or cuttings. The stem is made up of the shoot apical meristem, the newly grown stem just behind the shoot apical meristem, and the stem wood, or old growth stem. The leaves grow along the main stem and are the agents for photosynthesis. The flowers are usually yellow in color and only 1 inch in diameter. The fruit, or tomato, when cut into, consists of 2 or more inner cavities where the seeds are stored. Surrounding these chambers is the fleshy material that is protected by the outer skin wall. Tomatoes originated in South America as small bitter berries growing on bushes before it migrated to Central America where Mesoamerican people domesticated it. The exact date of domestication is unknown, but the Aztecs used it in their cooking. By 500 BC, it was being cultivated in southern Mexico and other areas. The name tomato comes from the Aztec term for plump fruit, tomato. The tomato spread around the world after the Spanish landed in the Americas. Tomatoes were brought back to Spain and then to southern Italy by the mid-16th century. Toward the end of the 16th century, domestic tomatoes made their way west to the Philippines, Indonesia, and later to the Asian mainland. Tomatoes do best in warm climate, making the transition from Central America to Spain, France, and Italy very successful. Thomas Jefferson is recognized for sending tomato seeds to America after eating tomatoes in Paris. In Iran, the tomato was known as the Armenian eggplant and currently as the French plum because of the two sources of influence. Today, the tomato is found in every corner of the globe, in just about every dish, and in every way imaginable. There are a few varieties of tomatoes that are dominant in the marketplace. Beefsteak, plum, cherry, and heirloom tomatoes can be found in any market or grocery store. Tomatoes can be found around the world today if it's in tomato juice, as a sauce, raw in a salad, fried green tomatoes, pickled and preserved in home canning, or even sun-dried. Possibilities are endless for the tomato. No one common technique in which tomatoes are prepared to be eaten. Tomatoes can be eaten raw, sautéed, grilled, and stewed, as well as a number of other ways. Tomatoes are best sliced with a serrated knife to keep from bruising the delicate tissue. In order to peel fresh tomatoes, it is best to drop them into boiling water for 30 seconds and then in an ice bath to stop the cooking process and cooling them so they can easily be handled. The skin is easily peeled off with a paring knife after this process. Tomatoes can also be seeded and juiced for different purposes. Juices can be used in cooking recipes as well as simply drinking it. Tomatoes can also be found in the canned goods aisle in whole, diced, pureed sauces and pastes. In the US, between 80 and 90% of all commercially produced tomatoes are processed, with California and Florida accounting for 2/3 of the fresh market tomatoes. Depending on the culture and the dish, the desirable flavor characteristics of tomatoes change. In Peru, tomatoes and tomatillos are most desired when bitter. In parts of Europe and Latin America, salads are made with tomatoes that are less fruity, more vegetable-like, mature green tomatoes. But the most common flavor characteristics of tomatoes are those that ripen on the vine in order for the tomatoes to accumulate more sugar, acid, and aroma compounds. The aroma compound fernel, which resembles sweet, savory caramel, is an important flavor of ripe tomatoes. Many supermarket tomatoes are picked while they are still green and unripe and later stimulated to turn red, not allowing them to mature on the vine, producing a flavorless tomato. Tomatoes are grown in 144 countries, with China harvesting 1.2 million hectares, producing 30 million metric tons. In 2011, China, India, the United States, Turkey, and Egypt were the top 5 producers of tomatoes. In the United States, Florida and California grow tomatoes on 42,000 and 37,000 acres respectively. These two states account for 44% of the acres tomatoes are grown on. There are about 50 to 75 tomato producers that make up the tomato industry in the United States, the majority in California and Florida. Tomatoes are grown on large commercial farms, small local organic farms, and residential gardens. They can also be found in community gardens across the country. Stop at any farmer's market or co-op and you'll be able to find locally grown tomatoes. Tomatoes are grown in many different types of soil, but do best in deep, loomy soil that is well drained and supplied with nutrients and organic matter. Tomatoes grow best in slightly acidic oil with a pH of 6.2 to 6.8. 7 hours of sunlight also promotes the greatest production of tomatoes. Fertilizers with a nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium ratio of 5, 10, and 10 are often used to promote tomato growth, although manure and compost are also used. Commercial growers grow breeds of tomatoes that are consistent in size and shape, resistant to diseases and pests, appropriate for mechanical harvesting and shipping, and the capability to be picked before fully ripening. Tomatoes are one of the most popular fruit grown in home gardens, and unlike commercial criteria, taste above all is what home growers worry about most. Early girl tomatoes grown in California are cultivated using a method called dry farming, which urges the plant to send its roots deep to find moisture deeper in the soil. This method is best suited for areas with little rainfall, such as California. In wetter areas like Florida, traditional irrigation methods are used. Recent research has linked the phytochemical lycopene, which is found in tomatoes, to decrease the risk of cancer. Lycopene is a powerful antioxidant that has displayed anti-cancer potential in lab studies. This cancer-fighting potential is magnified when tomatoes are consumed in a processed state, such as sauces, pastes, and juices, which allow lycopene to be released and absorbed more easily. Along with these cancer-fighting attributes, tomatoes are high in vitamin C and A. These vitamins help to protect DNA from free radicals that can lead to age-related diseases. Researchers have found that lycopene not only protects against cancer, but it also protects the heart from heart disease. According to research results, regularly consuming lycopene over many years could reduce the risk of heart disease by 26%. Other positive impacts tomatoes have on human health are: they contain antioxidants which help speed up the immune system. Tomato consumption can help improve skin texture. They contain folic acid and iron, which helps in the production of red blood cells. Tomatoes contain potassium, which helps protect against high blood pressure, high cholesterol, stroke, and heart disease, as well as many other positive health impacts. But tomatoes were not always thought of as a healthy dietary choice. In the 16th century, shortly after tomato was introduced to Europe from Latin America, the British believed the tomato was poisonous because of the similar appearance to the toxic wolf peach. In the US, the tomato wasn't regarded as a kitchen item until the times before the Civil War period. Tomatoes can be grown all across the globe. They are produced in small backyard gardens all the way up to large farms. But tomatoes are grown best in warm climates such as the Mediterranean and California here in America. The current thinking about tomatoes on their impact on the environment is mostly on the transport of them from where they are grown to where they are sold. That has led to the production of tomatoes on local farms to decrease the amount of fossil fuels used in their transport. A recently released study on the life cycle of tomatoes concluded that tomatoes grown in Florida and sold here have a smaller impact on the environment than those grown here in Minnesota. This is due to the smaller amounts of inputs needed to grow the tomatoes in the warmer climate of Florida than the colder climate of Minnesota. This may not directly affect human health, but greenhouse gases that are released add to the warming of the climate, which can produce problems in the future. Depending on the region of the world where tomatoes are grown plays an immense role in the impact tomatoes have on the environment. Like all crops, tomatoes need certain inputs, and when they are grown out of season or in a climate non-conducive to their optimal growth, these inputs increase. Depending on where tomatoes are grown depends on where in the life cycle the greatest environmental impact occurs. Tomatoes grown in California or Florida and then sold in Minneapolis see the greatest impact during the transport, whereas tomatoes grown and sold in Minnesota can have a larger environmental impact during production due to impacts such as fertilizers. The story of the tomato is an interesting one, having only been introduced a few hundred years ago. Without it, many cultures would not be the same. It's hard to imagine a world without the tomato.